Hello, I'm Brandy, and in this video I'll be taking this worn out console table and giving it a new life. This piece was actually gifted to me for free, and as you can see, it's got a lot of scratches and stains, but that's nothing a little TLC can't fix. You know, the bones of this piece are still in really good condition. There's no wobbling, the drawer slides in nice and easily. It's just a solid piece of furniture here, so I am really excited to get to work on this and excited that you're here watching this transformation. And this is my little. She's always looking for some attention, and she's such a cutie. She loves to get her belly rubbed. Little. So the first thing I did was remove the hardware. I always make sure to keep all the hardware together so that nothing gets lost. You know, even if I was planning on using updated hardware, I would still want to save these to possibly use again on a future project. So I always just keep everything together in either a small bucket or a Ziploc baggie, somewhere where it's all together and it's not going to get lost. After I've got all the hardware off, I just scrub this thing down. It's super important to thoroughly clean the furniture before applying any paint or product to it. I just used some Dawn dish soap and water and scrubbed it down, and then I went back and rinsed it all off after. I didn't even notice until I was down there cleaning, but the four corners of this table had these cute little emblems on them. So I simply just pried those off, and they were held in by these tiny little finishing nails. But I was super excited to be able to update the color and add them to the finalized piece. So I kept everything together, tossed it in a Ziploc bag, and then joined them with the rest of the hardware so that they wouldn't get lost. Then I had to go back in and clean under where those little emblems were, because there was definitely some dirt buildup under there, and I didn't want my paint to be affected by it once I got around to painting. So after everything was all cleaned and rinsed off, I came in with some stripper. The first part of the video had some technical difficulties and it didn't record, but I did the same process on the top as I'm doing here on the bottom. So I pretty much just globbed it on and spread it all around with a chip brush. You definitely want to use gloves when applying the stuff, as it can be really rough on your skin. And you want a nice thick layer. Once it was all on and spread around, I waited about 15 minutes. I came back in with my scraper and I scraped off all the gunk into a trash bag, and then I just wiped it all clean and made sure that there was no product left on it. The next morning, I brought it outside and I got my sander out. This is just a wireless sander, nothing fancy. It works perfect for small projects, not so great on big ones because it's battery operated and that battery does not last all that long. Luckily, I've got a few extra ones. But anyways, I started out with 150 grit sandpaper first, and then after I went over the whole thing with 150, I then went back over it with 220 to smooth things out. So there were some areas where my sander just wouldn't fit. So I grabbed a sanding block and I put my 150 grit sandpaper around it just so I can get into those tough little nooks and crannies. So same process here, just doing it by hand. Went over it with 150 and then came back with 220. It was basically just a scuff sanding at this point. We just want to rough it up so that there's something for the paint to adhere to. Once I determined that the top and bottom portion weren't going to be salvageable to use like a stain, I just decided I was going to paint over the whole thing. So scuff sanding was really all that was needed. Then I just came in with a simple brush and just went over it to knock off all that extra dirt and dust, just to kind of give it a basic dusting off, if you will. I brought it on inside and I just wanted to go over it again with a dampened lint-free rag. There was a lot of wind going on outside, so I wanted to spend as least time out there as possible. But basically this was my second go at just getting all that excess dust off. So here I'm just applying some light gray primer. I'm going to be using chalk paint to paint this table, and typically with chalk paint you really don't need to use a primer. And I never used a primer before this table actually, but I had seen some good suggestions on YouTube with some other YouTubers out there who actually do use the primer even though they're using a chalk paint. So I thought I'd give it a go. And, you know, I was happy with the results. I didn't feel that I used less paint. I still did a good 3 coats. So I probably won't be using primer again in the future unless it's a really dark color piece and I'm going to a really light color paint. But anywho, so I just applied this primer on and then I let it sit and dry. And again, you know, I'll be linking all of the products that I used in the description box below. In the meantime, you know, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe to this video. I would appreciate it. I hope to be coming out with new content as often as possible. My goal is to come out with at least a video a week. I'm just getting started though. You know, I'm a beginner, so bear with me, but yeah, if you want to follow me along on this journey, please like and subscribe below. If you're a furniture painter yourself and you want to give me any tips or tricks, please feel free to comment on what I'm doing right, what I'm doing wrong. Any suggestions are welcome. Thank you. So the color I used was a Behr chalk paint from Home Depot in the color Half Sea Fog. It's a really nice bluish gray. I was excited to use it. I've been really enjoying the Behr chalk paint, and it's real convenient. It's right down the street. I don't have to wait for shipping. But you know, Behr chalk paint has a pamphlet at Home Depot, and it would tell you all of the colors that are available in that chalk paint. And I've used colors from this pamphlet before. I used that farmhouse white on my kitchen table over here that you're going to see in just a second, right there. But come to find out, you can actually use any of the colors on the wall, so you're not restricted to just the options in this pamphlet. You could just take up one of those little cards with your color and tell them you want it in the chalk paint, and they will make it. I just used this simple little handheld brush to apply the paint. And I also had this little brush on hand for all of those little areas that needed a smaller touch. So here I'm just going to give the paint a good stir. You want to stir it for a good minute or so to get all of the colors combined, and make sure it's one consistent color before painting. Then comes the best part, the actual painting. That's always the most soothing. You know, all the prep work really sucks when you have to clean it and sand it, if you have to strip it. All that part is a pain in the butt, but the actual painting I find the most satisfying. So I just used this brush and went through with a just a light layer of paint for the first coat. And as you can see with that gray primer underneath, it really kind of almost matched the color that I was applying. So I guess that worked out pretty good. Between coats, I store my paintbrushes and my can of paint in Ziploc bags, and I throw it in the fridge until my next coat is ready to apply. That way I don't have to wash everything between coats. Very convenient. I just realized that I wasn't recording, and I thought I was, but went ahead and spray painted these with the Rust-Oleum Satin Paint and Primer in the color white. So I just plugged them into this pizza box. Those little teeny tiny little nails that were kind of holding those into place on the piece of furniture, I just plugged them into that box to hold them into place. And I also wanted to make sure I got the tips of those little nails with the same color. So that's one coat. I'll leave it here for a while, and then I'll come back, and I can definitely see here I'm gonna need a second coat. But I'll let it dry, and then I'll be back. After it had dried for a couple hours, I came back in and added the second coat of paint to the hardware. While we're waiting for the hardware to dry, I came back inside to go about the second coat of paint. So everything was kept really nicely in the fridge. The paint in the container is looking good. My brushes are still nice and fresh, so very convenient. Like I said, I don't have to wash between coats, and the brushes still stay really good, and so does the paint. Now in between coats, after the paint dried, I came back in with a 400 grit piece of sandpaper and I just went over everything just to smooth things out. So I did a total of 3 coats of paint on the base of this piece. And so after each coat had dried for about 2 hours or so, then I would come back in with the sandpaper and do that quick sanding down and then apply the next coat. Now it was time to move to the top. So for the top, I was going to do something a little bit different than I had done before. I had some leftover paint from a previous project in the color Burnt Almond. And it's a very nice beigeish color, if that's even a word, beigeish. It's a beige color. And I thought if I could mix that with some stain and kind of get that grayish beige driftwood kind of look, I just thought I'd give it a go. It was my very first time. So I basically went over the full top with the Burnt Almond and then I let that dry. Once the Burnt Almond paint dried, I added some of it to just a paper plate, and then I added my stain to the plate as well. And the goal was just to kind of mix them together to get that top. So the stain I used was just this gel stain from Verathane, and I picked it up at my Home Depot down the street. So it was just a gel stain in the color Kona. And I thought that those two colors together would kind of complement each other. So added it to the plate and then I started applying. So I just used a cheap chip brush for this. And I made sure not to glob it onto the brush. That's why you'll see me here wiping it along the edges. That way when it gets applied, it was kind of doing almost like a dry brush, and just kind of going over it very lightly. So, you know, I had to do several different techniques to get the top that I finally stuck to. And so yeah, I kind of went over it with this dry brush type method first. Sprayed a little water there just to kind of loosen things up a little bit, make it move across a little bit more easily, and I just kept working it back and forth throughout the whole table until I got that consistency that I liked. I kept having to come back in and add more color to the plate and add more stain to the plate, just to kind of get the consistency that I wanted as I was moving throughout the creation of this top. Then I grabbed this big deck brush that I had picked up at Home Depot and just started going back and forth across the whole top, because it really started to blend those colors together, and I really liked how it was doing that. It gave it a really great look that I was going for. After everything was kind of blended, I came in with this little broom and just gave it a little bit of texture. So just lightly going over the paint with this broom just gives it that, wood grain like texture that really brings out the various colors that have been applied. So just kind of went over that. I made sure to also get the edges so that they had the same texture as well. And after I used the brush, I went back in there with a little bit more color with the Kona stain just to deepen that color out, because it was still a little too light for my liking. And then I blended it again with the deck brush. I was totally winging this, by the way. You know, I've seen a few different videos out there of different techniques that people had, and they all were great. As I said, I'm a beginner, so this was kind of my first go at this. So I just kept adding dark and then adding light, and I continuously went over it back and forth until I got what I liked. So if you have any suggestions on what I could have done differently, or how you get this driftwood-like design on the top, please comment down below. Let me know, you know, what you do, what I'm doing right, what I'm doing wrong. All feedback is appreciated. Once it was dry, I came back in and lightly sanded it down just to make sure it was nice and smooth. I was very pleased with the way it came out. I think that this gray top really complemented the blue bottom. So I'm super excited about that, and I look forward to, you know, learning and improving this technique. Once everything was dry, I came back in with a sanding pad and just kind of distressed the edges on the base of the table, just by gently sanding on the edges and the lines in certain places to give it that distressed look that's really in style right now, and a lot of people love it. And I especially like the way it looks when you distress it on a colored piece. I see it a lot in white for that farmhouse look, and I thought it would be really neat to do it on the blue here as well. The soft sanding block was taking a little longer than I liked, so I just attached or wrapped around a piece of sandpaper. It just really made the process go a lot faster. seal everything, I came in with the Rust-Oleum chalked top coat in a matte finish along with a couple of the foam brushes, and I just went over it, you know, with the foam brushes and did a smooth back and forth, trying not to create any bubbles, and just being, you know, extra careful there, and everything applied very nicely. This top coat works great. I like to use wax a lot, and you know, when I apply wax, it's a lot easier. I know a lot of people get intimidated by top coats, and I know that at the beginning I sure was. So, you know, wax is kind of my go-to, but on this piece I really wanted to give it a small bit of sheen, and so the satin finish was going to do that for me. So I just applied it. I did 2 layers of the top coat on the bottom and 3 layers of it on top, just for that extra protection. And then I waited in between coats until it dried, and then again I did that light sanding between those coats with the 400 grit sandpaper, just to get out any little bubbling and just to make sure that it's totally smooth before applying the next coat. So once everything dried, I put the hardware back on, and then I staged it for pictures. So this piece actually sold in under 24 hours. I sold it for $250 on Facebook Marketplace, and so it was a pretty good profit based on the fact that I got it for free. So I was very pleased with the outcome. Thank you for spending the time and watching my video, and if you haven't already done so, please like and subscribe. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.
Bye.